one.
Hello, I'm Alexander Amatrana, candidate number 9924, and I will be doing the cultural solution to trafficking. So, to begin with, what is human trafficking? The definition of human trafficking is the unlawful act of transporting or coercing people to benefit from their work or service, typically in the form of forced labor or sexual exploitation. The big two facts of human trafficking, or the big two forms, are sexual exploitation and forced labor. Sexual exploitation is any actual or attempted abuse in a position of vulnerability, differential of power, or trust for sexual purposes, including profiting monetarily, socially, or politically from exploiting of another. And so on this graph, we see the differences in trafficking. This is a bit of more in Europe and Asia. It also talks about human trafficking being a $32 billion industry. So obviously a big issue in the world that's not thought about as much as it should be. And between 800,000 and 4 million women, children, and men are taken from their homes and sold into slavery. And 20% of human trafficking is labor, and 80% is sex trafficking. So sex trafficking, as I explained earlier, is exploiting people who are vulnerable or any person who is weaker than the other in return for monetary value, social, or political gain. Forced labor, on the other hand, is when individuals are compelled against their will to provide work or service through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. This slide and the graph shows more forced labor in modern day slavery. So 1 in 4 victims are children in forced labor. 14.2 people are in forced labor industries, 14.2 million people. 10% are in in-state imposed forms of labor, which means that they are forced by either the country or state that they're in to work. 22 are sexual exploitation, and 68 are a part of economic activities such as farming or producing in a factory. So the primary causes of human trafficking. The big three that I chose were poverty, lack of education, and demand for cheap labor or sex. There's also lack of legitimate economic opportunities, cultural factors, conflict and natural disasters, lack of safe migration options, deception and intimidation, and of course profit. There's an occurrence of it in North Carolina, the US, and the world. This graphic more specifically shows the type of exploitation, including sexual exploitation, begging or other forms, and forced labor. The graph shows, depending on the form of the person, what type of labor they do by the color, and by the form of the person, what more general people do the labor. Like this one is young women, that one's women in general, those are mostly children, and so on. So in North Carolina, in a 2020 report, it was listed top 10 for reported trafficking. There are 260 cases. And in the US, there's a total of 1,432 cases, which by calculation would mean North Carolina took up a total of about 18% of the cases. And between 2008 and 2019, victims worldwide more than quadrupled from 30,000 to 120,000. And as of 2022, there's a total of 115,324 cases worldwide. So another form of trafficking that people don't really talk about is forced marriage. So forced marriage is when kidnapped people are sometimes forced into marriages. And across the world, girls as young as 12 are being forced into marrying men who exploit them in what the UNODC, UN Office of Drugs and Crime, has called an underreported global form of human trafficking. Most marriages are young women, many of whom came from disadvantaged families, and research shows that the marriages may be arranged by family members, wedding agencies, or brokers, often for financial gain, and in some of the cases the brides are kidnapped, meaning that they might know the person, but it is completely against their will, and so they're taken against their home and sold for money. So what have we done here? In the United States, we've created the Amber Alert because on January 19th of 1996, Amber Hagerman took a bike ride from her home, and it only took her 8 minutes to go missing. 4 days later, she was found dead in a creek nearby. And so people in her neighborhood decided that they wanted to create something that would prevent either kidnappings or any of the sort from being conducted in their hometown. And so it eventually became a national thing. And so as we can see here, this is a more recent Amber Alert that was sent out as an example. And then more recently, the National Action Plan. During the Biden administration, a 3-year approach to combat human trafficking was passed, and this includes actions to strengthen prosecution of traffickers, enhance victim protection, and prevention within our borders as well as abroad. But what can we do? Well, first off, you need to know who to contact and report to. So as I listed, there's a line for suspected human trafficking and who to report that to, National Trafficking Hotline, and what can you do as a person, whether or not you know that there is trafficking going on. The more important thing is you need to expand vocally. Not many people are going to be thinking about trafficking, but of course, if you expand it vocally, whether or not that person takes it to heart the first time they hear it, eventually they'll have to listen and they'll think about it at some point. You can also learn indicators of human trafficking through the OTIP's, which is the Office of Trafficking in Persons website, which is the main website, at least for, I believe, in the United States, to see most of the trafficking. And then you, of course, ask local representatives what they're doing to stop human trafficking. This can be local politics, or what you can, ask the school board whether or not they're expanding their knowledge of human trafficking, whether through teaching or just meetings that they can talk. You can locate anti-trafficking organizations, ask how you can help. You can help, whether it's just helping them with supplies or giving them tips. And consider how you shop and eat. There's many different companies worldwide that use forced labor to create their products. So make sure you check on who you're shopping with and what products you're using and what you can do to prevent companies from using that labor. And to end it off, to work on my version of vocally expanding, I'd like to inform you of World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, which is the 30th of July, which was established recently in 2013 by a global committee that decided that we needed to expand our knowledge of it vocally.